115 Iranian Christians were arrested in 2020, though only 52 of those arrests were publicly reported. My next guest says Iranians are seeking God more than ever, even in the face of persecution. Kia Aalipour works with Article 18, an organization dedicated to the protection and promotion of religious freedom based on Article 18 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights by the United Nations. Kia, thanks so much for joining us today. Now, Iran remains on the world watch list, and yet the Iranian government says no one is persecuted on religious grounds. What is reality like for Christians in that country?
Thank you for having me. Well, it's a long story. Christian community, along with other religious minorities, face systematic state persecution and discrimination in Iran. Iran has ethnic and non-ethnic Christians. Ethnic Christian communities are permitted a degree of freedom to worship, although they also suffer restriction and discrimination in a larger scale. But the growing community of Christian converts or non-ethnic Christians is not even permitted to attend recognized churches, and they have to gather for worship in secret house churches and risk arrest and imprisonment. As you mentioned, in the year 2020, 115 Iranian Christians were arrested. 2 Iranian Christians were flogged only for drinking wine as a part of communion. Others were denied education or employment, and one couple were told they could no longer retain custody for their adopted lovely daughter, Lydia, on account on their faith. This is the reality for Christians in Iran.
Children being taken away from their parents because of their faith. Now, you came to faith, Kia, in Jesus in the Netherlands after you fled Iran, and you say there is a hunger for Jesus in Iran. Tell us more about that. Why is there such a hunger?
It is such a huge hunger, and this is unbelievable. Just to give you an example, before the revolution of 1979, there were approximately 500 or 600 believers from Muslim background in Iran. But now, according to several reports, Iran is one of the most growing evangelical churches in the world. Approximately more than 800,000 Christians live in Iran, and the majority of them are converts. And this is a conservative estimate, by the way. We shouldn't forget that many converts do not report their faith publicly due to fear of persecution. So we see from one side persecution is growing, on the other side God is at work. Yeah. And the Iranian regime is also very, very fearful of the growth of Christianity in Iran. Why? Because if more and more Iranians convert to Christianity, the legitimacy of Iranian regime, which is based on Islamic theocracy, not democracy, Islamic theocracy, will be totally lost. And this is one of the reasons that the persecution is on the rise. But obviously, as you also mentioned, we see that God is also at work in Iran.
Yeah, that gave me goosebumps as you talked about that. I have to ask you this question, Kia. You know, I'm always fascinated at the fact that there are so many people who will risk their lives for their faith. And there is a surge of the underground churches in Iran. Why is it that these people continue to risk their lives for a faith that they believe in, even though that they know that they might face imprisonment, death, even loss of their children?
Well, you're absolutely right, Maggie. First of all, persecution results from our identification with Christ. And for the past 4 decades, the number of Christian converts has increased, as we mentioned, and that has alarmed Iranian authorities. Therefore, they all have begun placing more restrictions on church attendees, violating freedom of worship, and shutting down Iran's main Persian language Bible publisher, even extrajudicial killing of the church leaders inside the country. But despite all risks, Christians gather together in house churches or online churches. During the pandemic, for example, many Christians in Canada and worldwide were forced to have fellowship online. Probably you did it as well. But for many years, online churches in Iran have been providing fellowship teachings, trainings, and counseling even for the isolated believers, because they cannot easily have fellowship. This is what we have over here, and we shouldn't take it for granted. Yeah, and they should be, by the way, they should be very careful, Iranians, I mean, with the cyber army of the Iranian regime. So even coming online and having fellowship online is not is very risky.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kia Aalipour from Article 18. Thank you so much for your time and also for your work.
You're most welcome.